In this video, I want to talk about the relationship between chronic illness, identity, and the self. Hi everybody, I'm Bruce Lambert from HowCommunicationWorks.com. This is a channel where I teach you about communication skills so you can improve your relationships, succeed at work, and be more confident. So I'm a college professor, that's my full-time job, and I run a center on health communication. One of my primary interests is chronic illness. So why would someone who studies communication be interested in chronic illness? What's the connection between chronic illness and communication? That's what I want to talk about here. The main connection between chronic illness and communication is the idea of self or identity. And self and identity, if you've been watching my videos, you know is a core concept for me. And if you go back to the very first video I posted, which I'll put a link to up here, you can hear me talking about the way that identities are constructed in interaction. And the key to the way identities are constructed in interaction is the idea of performance. The sociologist Erving Goffman, who thought of most of these ideas and who I learned them from, said that the world is a stage, right? And we're all actors on the stage, engaged in performances. And one of the main things we're doing in these performances is constructing our own identities. It is through these social performances, and by performances he means all the things we do in the social world. The way we talk, the way we walk, the way we dress, the situations we find ourselves in, the setting, the scene, all these things are social performances. And we construct our identity through this series of performances. And for every one of our identities, there's a set of performances which is essential to the construction and maintenance of our identity. So let me give you an example of the relationship between performance and identity in my life. So I'm a college professor. What performances do I need to engage in to produce my identity as a college professor? Well, for me, it's things like writing, reading, speaking, lecturing to students, grading papers, advising students, going to conferences. These are the activities or social performances which constitute my identity as a college professor. If I didn't do those things, I wouldn't really be able to call myself a college professor. Or I guess I could, but no one would really believe me. I wouldn't be a credible college professor if I didn't do those things, because a college professor is, by definition, someone who does those things. So we see here that identities are really nothing more than the sum total of our social performances. And this I discuss in detail in that first video. I've just given you a brief summary of it. Now you could go back to that first video and see the full discussion, which is like 20 minutes long. But here I just want to make the basic point. Each of our social roles or identities has associated with it a set of expectations about how someone in that role or someone with that identity will behave, how they will perform. So this set of performances, like the ones I listed for college professor, are what I call identity relevant performances. You have to do these things in order to be that sort of a person. So what does this have to do with chronic illness? Well, chronic illness obviously affects our bodies and causes what the sociologist Anselm Strauss calls body failure. That is, we get sick and our body begins to fall apart. It stops working the way it used to. And body failures can take thousands of different forms, right? Every possible function of our body can go wrong in chronic illness. We can get dizzy, we can lose our appetite, we can lose our vision or our hearing or sense of smell, we can have pain, stiffness, sleeplessness, we can have constipation or diarrhea. Anything we can think of can go wrong in our body. So all of these are body failures. So how are body failures relevant to identity and performance? Well, we need our bodies to do these performances. And certain body failures get in the way of performances which are vital to our identities. So certain body failures cause performance failure. And when they do, they cause loss of self. And loss of self is really the primary form of suffering in chronic illness. Chronically ill people, they suffer for many different reasons, loneliness and all sorts of things, pain. But I think the main source of suffering in chronic illness is the feeling that we are not the person that we used to be before we got sick. And that's combined with we're not going to be able to live out the life story that we had planned for ourselves. But let's focus now just on identity and loss of self. So our body fails us, and then we can't do the things we need to do. We have performance failure, and then loss of self. That's the chain reaction. Body failure, performance failure, loss of self. And that's how chronic illness affects identity. Another example might help to clarify this point about body failure, performance, and identity. Not every body failure causes loss of self. Not every body failure really troubles us that much. Some trouble us tremendously, others don't trouble us at all. So let's think of a couple of examples, again, thinking of my life. So one of the central performances in my identity as a college professor is speaking. I have to give lectures, I have to teach classes, I have to talk to students. If I can't talk, it's very difficult for me to do most of the performances which are central to my identity as a college professor. So for me, one of the body failures I dread is anything that would stop me from being able to speak. Anything around with my voice or throat is a really identity relevant body failure, and I would hope to avoid it. But on the other hand, let's imagine I got a knee injury, or let's imagine I got arthritis, the chronic illness of arthritis, and my knees began to get arthritis. Now, I don't want arthritis in my knees. It will be painful, it will be disruptive, but I don't really need flexible knees to be a college professor. I could get by on crutches. I could even get by in a wheelchair, God forbid. So my knees are not central to my identity as a college professor. What this illustrates is that not every body failure is identity relevant. Not every performance is identity relevant. So it's only when a body failure kind of intersects with an identity relevant performance that we really suffer loss of self. So I hope that helps you understand the connection between body failure, performance failure, and loss of self. There's one other idea I want to introduce before closing, and that is how this understanding of chronic illness opens up a new way of thinking about recovery from chronic illness. So in a purely biomedical sense, there's no recovering from chronic illness. If you get diabetes or hypertension or MS or something like that, it's chronic by definition because there's no cure. Medical scientists don't know exactly how to make it go away completely, so we just have to live with it. But if you think about chronic illness the way I'm talking about, sort of more socially, then chronic illness is really about the loss of self. Loss of self is about performances. What it means is that we might be able to craft new performances that allow us to be our old self. Or alternatively, in more serious situations, we might be able to craft new performances and a new sense of self. We might be able to think of the things we can still do with our body, even though it's failing us, and what sort of person we can be with this body. What sort of performances will support what sort of identity. And in this way, we can rebalance our sort of body and our identity, even though our body has failed. So thinking about chronic illness in this way opens up new horizons for the idea of recovering from chronic illness. And by recovering here, I don't mean making chronic illness go away completely. I mean overcoming loss of self, which is the central kind of suffering in chronic illness, by reconstituting a new sense of self through a new series of performances in spite of body failure. So that's all I had to say today about chronic illness, body failure, and identity. I hope you get these points. I'll probably return to them in other videos, but this was just an introduction to them. If you like this kind of video, and this is the first time you've come to our channel, I would be appreciative if you would consider subscribing to our channel. And if you do subscribe, click that notification icon so YouTube will send you a notification every time we post a new video. We also have a website, howcommunicationworks.com. I invite you to come on over to the website and download our ebook, sign up for our mailing list, and we'll email you not too frequently and tell you about when we have news for you and new videos and new blog posts. And give the video a like if you like it. Share as well. I have a question of the day before we close. What body failure would be most disruptive to your identity? What part of your body, if a chronic illness made that part of your body fail, would be most disruptive to your identity? I told you, for me, it would be losing my voice, that I couldn't be who I am. But for you, what body failure would be most threatening to your identity? This forces you to talk about or to think about how what performances are most essential to your most valued identities and how body failure might get in the way with them. So go down to the comments, join our community, and tell us about your understanding of body failure and identity. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.